everybody, this is Point Shooter again, doing another knife review for you on YouTube. Today I'm reviewing the Camillus US issue knife. This was a common pocket knife up until several years ago when Camillus closed, unfortunately. I've had this knife for several years and have carried it on many occasions. It has distinction and actually quite a following in that Camillus is now obviously a defunct company, but it was very popular with ex-military types because of its ruggedness and reliability, and actually there are quite a few collectors of it. I have a small Camillus collection myself, and you'll be seeing some more of their blades reviewed here on YouTube, so I hope that you'll enjoy this. These knives were made very commonly in the 1950s up until several years ago when Camillus closed, and they were issued to almost every branch of the military. There's several versions of it. There's the US stamped version, as I have, and also ones that were stamped US Marine Corps or USMC. Several different versions, as I said, exist. I have a fairly modern one. I've seen ones that are a little bit older than that, a little bit newer than this, and ones that are much older than this, all the way back into the 60s. Overall, this is a relatively lightweight knife. It's a little over 3 ounces. It's completely stainless steel. There is all stainless steel construction on this knife. It's a 4-blade pocket knife. We have a can opener, a screwdriver with cap lifter. We've got a 2 3/4 inch spear point blade. And we've also got, on the other side here, we've got a leather punch, which is one of my favorite features of this knife. Overall, this knife has pretty solid lockup on most of the tools. The knife blade, obviously, it's a non-locking design. So just like a Swiss Army knife, you have to be careful when you're using these blades because they do not lock. One thing that I like about this knife is that despite being a slip-lock design, I don't find that the blades rub on each other. You hear a lot of complaints from people that say, oh yeah, when I open that knife all the other blades come out. I don't have that problem. My knife has been an excellent worker and I've used it for several years. It also has a really nice lanyard ring, and I enjoy carrying this knife sometimes when I'm out in the backcountry doing camp tasks, and it's nice to have the knife on a lanyard because it's always there when you need it. Let's talk a little bit about the main blade on this knife. Obviously, it's a two-handed knife. It's not a one-hand opening knife. You've got a little nail nick up here. And for what it is, it's a very solid knife. If you've watched any of my other reviews, you obviously know that a locking design knife would be a little bit stronger of a locking design, and there's a little bit of blade play side to side, as you can see here. But the slip joint design is fairly solid. For most cutting tasks, this is going to be sufficient. Again, it's 2.75 inches, 2 3/4 inches, and so for most cutting tasks, it's going to be decent. The stainless on this blade gives a fairly toothy sharpening edge to it. If you are sharpening the blade, you're going to get somewhat of a toothy grit on the edge. It'll come up right razor sharp, but the micro serrations, if you were to look at this very closely, seem to be a little bit higher on this knife. The main blade is adequate for what it is, and in a survival situation, which is what a lot of these knives were issued for, it's ideal. The next blade is the can opener. I've not used this a lot. The few times I have used it, it's not been my personal preference. My favorite design is the P38 can opener, which has been used by the military since World War II, and this is my favorite can opener, which is why I always have one. But the can opener on the Camillus knife is decent for what it is. Let's look at the next blade. We've got a screwdriver. Very broad tip. You can take Phillips screws out with this, flathead screws, anything you really can fit it in, and it's very secure. I've taken out large screws with this. The can lifter works adequately. Usually you'll take more than one punch to remove a lid, but it still works fairly well. And the last blade we have here is the leather punch. This is one of my favorite features of this knife. I use it for several different features, and it has a very sharp tip on it. One thing that I've done is I have sharpened this edge to make this more razor sharp, and I have put holes in leather with it before. It's very useful for that in a survival situation if you were going to be stitching leather, or just for everyday use. If you're a person who makes leather accessories, holsters, magazine cases, anything like that, this leather punch is a very nice tool to have. Another thing that I enjoy about it is the ability to strike a fire starter, such as my mini fire steel here, without dulling your knife blade. I enjoy having a backup blade, and it's very easy to sharpen this rather than dulling your main knife blade with a fire starter. When I'm out in the backcountry, I always will have a fire striker with me so that I can start my fire without matches or relying on a lighter. The lanyard loop on this knife, often called a bail, is very typical of these older design knives, and it's very adequate. There's very smooth flow for it, and it can obviously accommodate a very large lanyard. What I normally use is 550 cord, or you could put this on a carabiner clip, and you could clip this on your pocket or on your belt loop, anything you want. I usually will carry this knife on a lanyard if I'm out in the backcountry, or if I'm just around town, sometimes just loose in my pocket. This knife is not carried as much by me anymore. Usually I will have, and you'll see this reviewed later, a Swiss Army knife if I'm out in the backcountry. But sometimes I like to take this knife out with me just to give it some use. Overall, this was about a $20 knife. Since Camillus is closed, these have shot up in price. You can find them on eBay, and some, I don't know if many online retailers still have them. Overall, for the money, I feel that it's a very nice blade, but then again, I collect Camillus knives. For you, maybe a Swiss Army knife, like a Swiss Army Huntsman, might be a better knife for out in the backwoods. But for what it is, I like this knife a lot. Very solid blade, and it stands up to a lot of abuse. It is flat ground. Some models have hollow ground blades. There's a lot of discussion on the forums about what years the hollow ground blades began. Again, I have a 2003 model, and I have a flat ground blade, which I enjoy. I'm really not a big fan of hollow ground blades on my pocket knives. For something that you might use in the kitchen, that might be a different story, but for anything where I'm going to be possibly cutting branches or building a shelter, doing camp tasks, I really like that full flat ground blade. Overall, this is one of my favorite folding pocket knives, non-locking pocket knives, and for what it was issued for to the military, it certainly served that role very well. This was to be a multi-service, that is multi-branch, issued knife, and it was issued for many years within the military. Again, I feel that there are perhaps better blades now. Locking blades is what I prefer when I'm out in the backcountry. But for a collector's piece or a small, solid knife, the Camillus US issue folding knife is an excellent little pocket knife. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and if you have any questions, feel free to comment on my channel page, and I hope you'll stay tuned for more of my reviews. Take care. This is Point and Shooter signing out.